Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about The Devil All the Time, the one where Spider-Man gets into a fight with Batman, the one where we can't find any American actors to play characters with severe Southern accents. So, yeah, I mean, that's actually the funniest thing about this whole movie. Everything else is downhill from there, I think.
The best use of colons ever in a sentence. That's hilarious. Plus, it's also Winter Soldier.
Yeah, Winter Soldier.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's just wrap them all in there. Throw in Alice in Wonderland for good measure, and you're good to go.
Not to give too much away about how I felt about the movie, but those thoughts about those actors working together before were way more interesting than what was going on when I was experiencing this film. So you can take what you want from that.
Well, we don't have to pull punches. I didn't like this movie. And you want to give me your 2-word review of it?
2 words? I don't know if
I'll give you
4 words.
4 words. Not enough character development.
Okay, mine are should read the book.
Ugh. Sure.
Because it just, we can just jump right into it. The first half an hour is so confusing and so what is happening here? And it's just flipping and flopping and going back and forth. And I kept thinking to myself, this must be based on a book because the director or screenwriter, who happens to be the same person, I believe, and I believe the writer of the book also does the narration in the movie.
That's probably the best part.
Yeah, actually, I agree with you.
Donald Ray Pollock.
I agree with you. He's got a great voice. He should do voiceovers. He could give Morgan Freeman a run for his money. But the point is that it just felt like a book that they could not make concise enough to make sense on film. And you don't have enough. I wouldn't necessarily say character development. I understand where you're getting that from, but there's just not enough development, period.
Yeah.
To warrant it coming together at the end. And it does come together at the end. And I'm not as easygoing with dissing on things as most people, because there's a lot of people who worked on this film. There's a lot of people who are talented in this film. There's a lot of people who do really good work in this film. So Riley Keough. And
of course.
So I have to give them their due because it's not Riley Keough's fault. And I just think that the director wanted to put a lot of the strong plot lines into the movie, but it didn't seem to pan out. So It's not that it was confusing. I used the word confusing. It's not that it's confusing. It just doesn't add up for much because you're in it and then all of a sudden you're out of it. And then you're in it and then you're all of a sudden you're out of it. And then at the end of it, the truth of the matter is I recast the whole thing with the same cast, and I think I came up with a better idea.
Well, I don't really. The director's Antonio Campos, and I mean maybe it's a tall order to take something that was probably a decent sized book that had more fleshed out characters and try to distill it down. But at the same time, I still don't think that you can't excise any of the characters, and it only kind of started coming together for me. To try to I was trying to figure out how could you make a movie like this where you've got all of these characters and then essentially they're all tied together with some small strand and we're kind of we're kind of pulling on each of them and they're all really far apart, but by the end of the movie I had enough faith in the director and faith in the story and in the in this movie that I knew they were all going to kind of be sucked into the center somehow, but it just didn't seem like there was enough time paid with all the characters, and I'm sure the book would have a better ability to do that a little bit more expansively. But at the same time, I was I don't know how you could do that with a movie. But then I came back to Magnolia, and Magnolia is essentially a story about a bunch of disparate people that all just happen to be in the same physical location that somehow cross paths, and we get to see all of them right up front, and we have no idea what each does with the other. And so but that definitely comes together in a much more meaningful way for me. And in this movie, it just feels like it feels like it's preying upon our darkest feelings or just what's the worst thing that can happen to this one character at this time? Well, that's what's going to happen. And and it's just unrelenting. And I think that maybe there's a better way to do it, but I don't know. It just the whole time I was most of the time I was watching it, when I wasn't trying to pull out like, oh wow, these character choices are really interesting, or whatever that is, trying to figure out like shot framing and things like that. When I was trying to like pull out little pieces, but I kind of knew the whole time that it just didn't feel like it was coherent for me. So,
well, let's give it its credit that it's 2 hours and 18 minutes versus 3 hours and 10 minutes of Magnolia.
That's true.
That's
You're
one
right.
thing. Maybe some time added to the film. And it's interesting to me. I'd like to hear the backstory of why he didn't go with a longer film. Because one, I'm not sure if this was supposed to be released on Netflix or not. If it was originally supposed to be a theater release, I don't know any of the backstory to it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was a theater release, there are movies like Magnolia and Lord of the Rings and a lot of films, Titanic, they're all long films. And if you give us good character studies and breakdowns and good connection between the characters, the audience doesn't mind a long movie. At least I don't. As long as it's interesting and intriguing, and there's stuff in Magnolia that keeps you going for 3 hours and 10 minutes. It's a long movie, and well, a long movie by some people's standards. So why not add 20 minutes to it? Why not make it 2 hours and 2 hours and a half? And add that extra 20 minutes of the character stuff in the beginning of the film. Because speaking of Alice in Wonderland,
Mia Wasikowska.
Yes, thank you. Was she the young lady in Lost River?
Oh, I don't know. I saw that, but then I quickly
I can't
forgot
remember if
about
it's
it.
her or not. I like her a lot.
Saoirse Ronan was
That's
the young
right.
girl.
Okay, I wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure her and Mia get mixed up a lot by people. It's just
yeah.
a shame that somebody like me did it, because I don't normally do things like that. But anyway, the point is that she's wonderful. I have seen her in a lot of things, and I want to know what it was about her that was so unattracted to one guy and attracted to another guy. They, of course, are saying because that one guy was the preacher and walking in the light of the Lord, if you will, is why she was so attracted to him. But really, what is it? What is it that brought her to a place where, and I'm not saying there has to be anything wrong with her to find that preacher guy attractive, or to be attracted to him because he is a preacher and he is a believer like she is. There doesn't have to be a conflict there, but I need to know why she is more attracted to him, who seems like an unrealistic partner, than the guy sitting next to her, who seems like more of a realistic partner, even though that guy was already in love with somebody else. Bill Skarsgård was already in love with somebody else. It wouldn't have mattered anyway, but I need to know more. I need to know why the grandmother is so religious. Was it her time? Was it, meaning the time frame she grew up in? Was it something that she believed because she really fully believed it? What was it? If we're going to blame God throughout a whole entire movie,
Yep.
I'm not saying people blame God, but really, here's my biggest issue with it. And I don't know if it's in the novel or not. If you're going to spend all of this time with all of these horrific things that happen to these people who are believers, I need balance. I need a believer that it works for.
Yeah.
I can't have just everybody who believes have something tragic happen to them. If it's an indictment about religion, okay, cool. If it's an indictment about Christ, okay, cool. If it's an indictment of the Bible, okay, got it. If it's an indictment of the time frame and their beliefs, okay, got it. But there's somebody in that town who is walking in the light of the Lord and doing it the right way. So why not balance that somehow? They need a balance. And that could have been, I want to call her Alice in Wonderland now because I'm afraid to say her last
Mia
name.
Wasikowska.
Yes, thank you. What he said. I have to practice those kind of things before I actually say them over and over again. But why did we, she seemed sweet and kind and innocent and really a believer. Why did we not get more of that? It would have balanced the equation for me.
Yeah, I think that you're right. There is no joy. Like none of the characters, we never saw any of the characters on screen experiencing joy. We never got to see how she got together with him. We never got to see a good relationship. It was always reflective. It was always Tom Holland's character sticking up for Eliza Scanlon's character. It was always, we never get to see like them having fun together. We never get to see anybody really smiling or laughing or anything. There wasn't any of that. So there's no like dynamism. If everything's always bad, then we don't have a reference for bad. So we need to see like a little bit of good, and then we can see the bad, and then that makes us appreciate the good more, and it makes us feel more emotionally affected by the bad. But when it's just bad, 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 bad all the time, I mean, we don't really get to see the Haley Bennett character and Bill Skarsgård get together. We get to see that may be the only time when like he looks at her and she's in the diner, and and he gets to see her helping out the homeless man in the back behind the diner. Like that's about it. And she has 3 scenes in the movie, and Mia Wasikowska has 3 scenes in the movie, and so there's all of these characters that, well, I mean the best, or like the nicest or most genuine and pure characters have a handful of scenes in the movie. I guess Eliza Scanlon would be considered that too, but once again, she doesn't get. There's no. You could see it coming a mile off with Robert Pattinson's character, and I'm not saying any other names, but I mean, really, do I need to? I don't know. I'm getting just really. There's also a problem that I have. There's also a problem I have because I'm Christian, and I don't have any problems like you. I don't have any problems if you're gonna like go after Christians, like fine. I mean, Christians have done a lot of bad things over time, but it just seems like someone could watch this movie and say like, man, wouldn't things have been a lot better if there just wasn't Christianity? And it's like, okay, well, you can have that conversation, but then at the same time, there's all these other people that their faith got them through, and it doesn't even have to be Christianity. It could be Islam, it could be Judaism, it could be whatever else. Their faith got them through very difficult times. So this movie is just kind of like a Michael Moore version of Christianity, or you could read it as that, where it's like, this is my view, and that's it, and there's no space for anything else. So that's, I mean, yeah, it's difficult. At least they kind of like point it out, like when you get to see the kind of behind the curtain of Robert Pattinson's character. I'll say it this time, Reverend Preston Teagarden. You get to see when he's picking through all of the food and he ends up grabbing all the liver and onions and he eats them all for themselves. Like they explain that in the movie, like, yes, he grabbed the liver and onions because he wanted it. He didn't want anybody. It was so good that he didn't want anybody else to have it. But he was able to like do an end around and somehow make everybody think that he's being selfless when he's essentially being completely selfish. So that, I mean, yes, they were very explicit in that, and every bad person except for the sheriff. In this movie, the Sebastian Stan character had religion or Christianity specifically as a motivating factor in hurting the people that they hurt. And you could say that they were mentally affected and have perverted Christianity, which I would agree with, that they've definitely perverted the teachings of Christ and the Bible to their own end. Or something's happened in their life that has caused the Jason Clarke character. Something's happened in his life to where they even said this in the movie, where that was the only way that he could feel close to God, was doing these, horrible things to these hitchhikers. And I'm sure that there was something in Riley Keough's character's life that got her to that point too, where she couldn't leave. I mean, that's a representation. We see that in other movies, like a woman who is attracted to a man and cannot leave that man for various reasons. I mean, she didn't even have a kid that was tying her to him. She just couldn't leave. So that's also a difficult situation. So it's frustrating because I look at this from my point of view and I'm like, well, that's not how Christianity is represented for me. But other people they could be like, see, look at those crazy Christians back in the day. And it's like, ugh, that's rough.
Yeah, but even what they do as the crazy Christians you become numb from it right after she gets stabbed. Spoiler alert.
I'll say, spoilers from now on. Yeah, because like I want to give people time. Like, so what we think about this movie. So there you go.
It's not that I necessarily want to criticize it. I just don't understand some choices, and that's always my thing. Why are we watching this? What is the purpose that the storyteller is telling this story? What's the reason? And because there's so many horrific things that happen, actually, Bill Skarsgård going to war, the dog, the crucifixion of the dog, then the neck. And it's just like, it's one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. And I'm not even sure if balance would have fixed that. I think tone would have fixed that, and pacing would have fixed that. And the way it was put together could have fixed that. Because it's not an indictment of Christianity per se, from my point of view, because so many damn things happen, you forget that it's about Christianity at some point, where it's just like these really bad people who happen to listen to gospel music or hate gospel music or happen to go to church and make chicken livers, all are wrapped around these things that are happening. It's almost insignificant at some point that it's a Christian-based storyline, if you will, meaning that's what their belief is. So I don't know if I'm articulating that correctly, but there's just so much bad things happening. You become numb to it because there's nothing to balance it, which we've already talked about, but also it's like, what is the purpose? What is the reason why, why isn't there isn't even somebody like praying going, okay, God, help me through this. I mean, there is, but there isn't. It's sort of, but
it's
not
disingenuous.
really.
The Bill Skarsgård character does it, but he's doing it because that's what his dad taught him.
Right, but he also just wants to save his wife.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not like, hey, God, what are you trying to teach me here? What do I need to teach my son because my wife is dying? And there's no blaming of God, which is always a unique thing when it comes to Christianity. How could you do this to such a wonderful person? There's none of the stages of death. There's none of the stages of
grief. You mean,
yeah, grief. Thank you. Would I say death? That's why I was pausing, because I was like, I knew death wasn't right, but okay, yes, grief. So why are we not calling upon this strong belief to get us through these things? All Christianity has become in this movie is a manipulation to get to something else, to get something. It's like when you're a little kid and you pray for a new bike. You're not praying for something. You're not praying for guidance. You're not praying for knowledge. You're not praying for acceptance. You're not praying for any of that stuff. You're praying for something. And, even as a young kid, you realize that's not the way you're supposed. That's not what God is up there doing. God's not like up or down there, in there, over there, all around us, wherever. Because it really bugs me, by the way, in all these movies about religion, that they always look up to the sky. It's like, come on now. Like, why is that always the end all be all where God is? I mean, I get why, because that's what we've been taught.
Yeah. You like to feel like you like to ground him, in a place or her or whatever you call it. Yes.
But come up
why
with
is it him?
something new. Give me something new. Close your eyes and swirl your head around, because he's the whole damn universe. I mean, so come on. I get why we do it, because it's the same reason why we allow certain looks to make emotions in movies. You said it last week in our podcast that movies kind of like trick us. They kind of have it easier because they are like putting the emotion on screen. You're putting the sad person in the painting to show us that you're supposed to be sad looking at the painting. So I get that, but it's just like, it's so frustrating because you have these enormously talented people, and nothing about it made me want to read it, because I'm already reading a couple books that I'm really enjoying right now. But I wanted to angrily read it, because I want to know what was it in the source material that you can tell pace and tone and cadence and certain things by a book. You just can't. You can tell a rhythm of a book. And I'm wondering what was cut out from the mother's scenes. Was the mother's courted by the preacher in the beginning? What was it? Why was this uberly talented actress given 3 scenes where she really doesn't do anything? I mean, she really doesn't do anything. And then when she does get stabbed in the neck, and there's that moment where she has that confusing look where she's looking at him, and then she's looking around. Maybe she's looking for God. Maybe she got it right. In that moment, you think to yourself, my goodness gracious, if she had been given 3 or 4 more scenes with dialogue, what would we have from this movie? Because just in that moment, the shock and the revelation of what's happening to her, and then she calls out her baby's name, which is so well done. She's so good in that scene, but nothing else. So it's frustrating. It's not like I'm angry because I wasted my time watching a movie that I don't think is any good. That's not the point. I'm always interested in stuff, whether or not I think it's good, bad, or indifferent, because the creative process is interesting to me, and being able to fill in the blanks for something that's not working for me is always fun for me. Not that I would know anything about remaking a movie or how to make it any better, but I'm wondering what was left on the cutting room floor. Why was it not fleshed out? Because I'm sure it is in the book. So was it an energy he was trying to promote? Like I said, keep saying pace or tone. Was there a certain tone that he thought he was getting from it? And the way he clips from one scene to the next, when you first see Riley Keough in the
diner,
yeah. And then it flips really quick. It's odd. Some of the shots are odd. And
yeah, it's trying to do the not sliding doors. It's trying to do the kind of like crossed paths type thing where it's like, oh yeah, they're all kind of just around and they're all, intermingled, and they're all gonna intersect at some point in the future. And people are more of a community than you think. You affect one person and it affects another person, and they're all, we're all intermixed, and that's kind of like the Magnolia thing. And it's just like, we're all in one big community. We all need to figure out how to, live together, blah, blah, blah. But I just don't. I did want to talk about Riley Keough real quick, since you brought it up again. And I feel like we've probably said this before, but I feel like she is taking these roles, which are challenging and may not be like meaty as someone who wants to be like a lead actress or something, or Oscar nominated, but she's like imbuing them with a performance that is bold, and it doesn't make her look good. You know what I mean? Like as a person. And like, just like, did you see the teeth that she had, or whatever she had on her teeth? Like, just like nasty. They looked like wood or something, but they were just like nasty, stained and stuff. So she's still beautiful somehow, amazingly, but she is doing these things that like, it's just a weird, like this beautiful woman doing these horrible things. And I wouldn't expect someone to really seek those out, to really try to like make them better. It's like somebody else could have gotten that role and they wouldn't have done what she did with it. And I'm just excited that she's making the hard choices or the hard decisions to take these roles, even though I'm not, I don't know. I don't know what she feels. I don't know what actors feel about these movies. Like, what do you think an actor feels about a movie like this?
She's got nothing to lose because she's obviously financially sound. At least seemingly so. We've talked about all this before. We don't know what her financial background is, but more than likely she's got money somewhere. So she's not hindered by having to have a job.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about her acting career that says she needs to prove anything to anybody. Nobody knows who she is.
Yeah.
They don't know her grandfather is Elvis. They don't care once they see her. Mm-hmm. It's insignificant that she is related to who she's related to. It has no bearing in anything. Now, unfortunately, in her family does have some situations going on that does call her into the public eye as a famous person. But that's par for the course. And unfortunately, families are tricky and they're messy and they're bloody and they're messy. They're just icky. And so if my family was in the newspaper, it would look just as bad as anybody else's family who gets into the newspaper. That said, she's got nothing to prove to anybody. So why not take a part like this and try to flesh it out and try to figure out the humanity in the character. And boy, does she ever do that. There was a moment where she disappears in the movie, and I thought to myself, I'm calling Josh and canceling the podcast if she does not come back to this movie.
Yeah.
Not because she was doing such a great thing, but because she was really the most interesting thing up to that point for me. I followed everything she thought and did. Not that I didn't do that with the other characters, but for whatever reason, something about her.
Well, she straddles the line between like a horrible person and like a redeemable person. All these other people are unredeemable. Robert Pattinson, Jason Clarke, they're just done. And she's like on that line.
The irony is, you were talking about Sebastian Stan's character not being a religious-based or a Christian-based character, if you will. Riley Keough's not either. I mean, she mentions stuff about God, but she also talks about how things get on her nerves. And in particular, I don't like gospel music and I don't like this kind of music, that kind of stuff. I don't know if that's a statement to like counteract her being, because she's starting to become disillusioned with the path that her and Jason Clarke have taken. So that might just be, I don't like Christian music because I'm not liking where I'm at in my life, but there's something about it. And I would like to know why, or at least explore the question of why somebody would be in that situation. Like you said, Stockholm Syndrome, whatever it may be. She could truly love Jason Clarke. It could be a lot of different reasons why she could be sociopathic and psychopathic. And some level she is, for even putting up with it on any level. But there's a quality of wanting to not be this bad person. And I don't know if that's because the scene where she tries to drive away from him, because you can't pin it all on Jason Clarke. You just can't. She's involved in this situation too. It would not work without her, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
She's the attractive female in the situation that's being manipulative and being manipulated. So that was all thrilling to me. Not that, but the character study you were getting from Riley Keough and the way that it was interwoven at the end of the movie and how it all kind of came back together. And like you were saying, a thin thread pulling people together, sewing people together at the end. That all worked for me. The last half an hour of the movie totally 100% worked for me. And I kept thinking to myself, obviously the beginning of the film had to have had some kind of impact on me because the end of the film worked for me. And you wouldn't have realized about the dog being crucified and the burial place and all that other stuff. If it didn't have an impact on me in the beginning of the film, then it wouldn't have registered so deeply at the end. But that said, there's a tautness and a tension and a pacing thing at the end of the film that's much tighter than the beginning of the movie. Now, that might be because you don't need to learn anything about these people at this point, although you do learn things because Sebastian Stan is learning about his sister and is worried about self-preservation. So he goes to their hotel house, whatever that is, wherever their apartment,
extended
which is a hotel.
Stay.
It's weird. Yeah, extended stay, which is not that weird. I've actually worked in a place like that, but it just seems much more of an apartment than an extended stay. But anyway, for self-preservation reasons, he has to figure it out. And then he figures out the thing about the gun and Tom Holland and so forth and so on and so on and so on. And I'm just wondering if the director, you never know because things are shot out of sequence with movies a lot of the times, but did he find his footing by the end of the movie, or is the movie, the way that the script was brought together at the end of the movie, made for a much more interesting watch? I'm not sure. But I didn't have questions about Riley Keough because I learned enough about Sandy to know what I need to know by the end of the film. So I find that intriguing because is that because Riley Keough pulled that off? Is it because the writing was better for her character? What was it? I'm in the camp of it's Riley Keough because, she is, let's start a religion and worship her. But she does something where you just know everything she's thinking and feeling at every second she's on film. It's amazing. Riley Keough makes interesting choices, probably because when she reads something, she feels like she can do something with it or it scares her. So she wants to do things. She's not worried about being Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter. She's not worried about that at all. She's not worried about being an ex-model or her family issues. She thinks about character first. At least that's what it comes across to as me.
You're right. I think she does. She it seems like she steers into the skid. She reads a script and is like, "Oh, there's no way I would want to play this." And she's like, "That's the reason I should play this."
Absolutely.
We also get to see Eliza Scanlon sick in a bed. So, I mean, that ticks off another check mark because every other movie I've seen her in, she's been sick in a bed. So I think she was sick in Sharp Objects too. I mean, I haven't seen some of obviously Little Women famously, but then I haven't seen some of the other movies she's been in, but she's Australian. You got, I wrote it down. So like Tom Holland's British, Robert Pattinson's British, Eliza Scanlon's Australian, Mia Wasikowska's Polish and Australian, Jason Clarke's Australian, Bill Skarsgård's Swedish, Sebastian Stan's Romanian. I didn't know that. And Harry Melling, who plays the husband of Mia Wasikowska, is British, and he was also Dudley in. We've talked about him. We talked about him in Buster Scruggs.
Yeah,
and he was just in. We just talked about it. No, we didn't talk about Old Guard, but he was in Old Guard. So, did we talk about Old Guard? That's how much I remember that movie.
No, we didn't. We were going to.
Yeah. Okay.
We watched two movies, one of which being that one, and we chose to talk about the other one.
Got it. Yeah. Wow. Anyway, so I was kind of amazed when I started just seeing all these actors pop up, and I was just like, man, we just cannot field a movie about an American town and with American actors anymore, I guess.
Unless you're Riley Keough.
Well, that's true. Yeah. What did you think about the Robert Pattinson's accent specifically? I wanted to ask you about it because it seemed out of left field to me. I mean, you lived in North Carolina, you live in Virginia now. You've been around people with Southern accents. I have too. I was born in Georgia. I got family there. I go there all the time. So, and I live in North Carolina. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of people liked it, but it seemed strained to me.
It's bold, it's solid, and it's consistent. And I would not begin to criticize anybody's accent because I can't do them to begin with. And everything in a movie is exaggerated to a little bit of a degree of heightened. First of all, it's heightened. It's a film.
That's true.
It's not real life. We talked about this when we were, I forget what podcast, but anyway, this is how I feel about it. You watch the Jersey Shore and you think to yourself, no one talks like that in real life. No one has a Camaro from 1983 that's pink with a black pinstripe going down it that cursives into somebody's name. No one really has that. That's just a movie. That's untrue. People to this day still have Camaros that are pink and silver and have a pink pinstripe going down it that turns into Janine or Jeanette or whatever the name is, Samantha, and it's spelled out in cursive and then the pinstripe keeps going down the car. That still exists. So I'm not making a comment on whether or not I think that's good, bad, or indifferent. Hey, man, live your life. Get your pink Camaro and your pinstripe. I'm good with it. But when you see it in a movie, you go, that's exaggerated. Nobody acts like that in real life. That's not true because they do. My point is that people do talk like this in the South. There are exaggerated accents.
No, that's true.
What Robert Pattinson did was not his fault, in my opinion. I don't think he can be blamed on any level because I think he's miscast. He's in the wrong role. He just is. I think it's an interesting choice. I think he did what he could do with it, but there's nothing there for him to hang his coat on. It's all this walk into the church, look over my shoulder slowly, not recognize a guy who's 5 feet away from you with a hat on because the shading is just enough to where you can't tell it's Tom Holland's, but this guy comes to church every week and you see him every week and you saw him the first day you were there. You criticized his grandmother, but yet complimented his grandmother. There's no way he doesn't know who that kid is.
But hold on, that could also be a character trait too. It could be the fact that he doesn't even pay attention to his parishioners because he's a fill-in pastor and he doesn't give a crap anyway. Why would he care about what a guy looks like that comes to church every week? He's getting his money and he's getting to be with all these high school girls. So that's fine.
Why don't you take that hat off? Do I know you, boy? That would solve the whole thing.
Yeah, well...
Have I seen you before, boy?
Yeah.
And then when Tom Holland finally confronts him, you've seen me every week, damn it. Boom, 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 boom. It's a simple fix. And I'm not going to take back my thoughts on it by saying that I don't know anything about making a movie, but I've seen a ton of movies, and it just seems to be like everything that Robert Pattinson did is right out of a handbook of how to make a bad guy who's supposed to be a bad guy that everybody in the world should know is a bad guy from the moment he opens his mouth, from the moment he shows up, from the ruffled shirt to the way that he just, everything about his face is just, he's a bad guy. And any kid under the age of 5 would be like, bad dude. Like, he would be the guy with the black cowboy hat on. It just, he's the bad guy. He's miscast. I have no problem with his accent. It didn't bother me. I can see why people had problems with it. The interesting thing is that what does Robert Pattinson sound like in real life? Do we really know what he sounds like? Obviously, we can go on YouTube and hear interviews, but the accents and the dialects and the voices that he creates for his characters on film are all different. So he sounded nothing like that guy from The Lighthouse, and he sounds nothing like what he did in that one word for Batman, the Batman. So good for him. I mean,
to me, it just seemed like he was trying to like evoke, I don't know, like the warden from Cool Hand Luke or something. You know, where that's accentuated too. And I don't know, is that really how? What's his name? Strother Martin. Is that really how he sounds? Like, I don't know, but just the whole like what we have here, like it just sounds fake. Like, I don't know, it just sounds fake. But it's kind of funny actually. But to me, I don't know, maybe it's just me.
Sounds fake until you're somewhere in Mississippi and what you need to do here is go down the street to the stop quick. And then you're like, what was that? And it's, you know, people have these accents are based on how people do talk. So the exaggeration happens to be, for me, about the heightenedness of the theatrical part of a movie. It's not necessarily, if we were watching people in real life and they sounded like that, would you think they were fake? No. You would just think they really have an exaggerated accent. I know somebody that lives in North Carolina, is sweet, kind, sounds just like the guy from Will and Grace. Leslie, he's on American Horror Story. He's great. Anyway, his accent is really strong. And someone might think that he's putting it on for the movie or the TV show or whatever, but he's not. That's how he really sounds. And I know somebody who sounds just like him. My point to accents is this. I don't want an accent that's telling me that's a bad guy because of the way he looks. So his accent, Robert Pattinson's accent, did not do that to me. But the way that they frame him and the way that he's shot and the way that they make the camera move over his shoulder as he's looking, that whole scene with him and Tom Holland, other than the way that what happens when he shoots him, that was all well done because you're not sure whether or not he got shot. That was successful in my opinion. So no, I mean, for whatever reason, it's like Americans doing British accents bothers me way more than British, Australian, New Zealand, whoever, wherever you're from, doing American Southern accents, because the Southern dialect has been proven phonetically to sound more like Elizabethan Shakespeare
I agree.
than, And when you do a Shakespeare speech in iambic pentameter and you do it with a Southern accent, it seems to make way more sense. If I'm ever trying to learn Shakespeare, I try to do it in a Southern dialect, or what my opinion of a Southern dialect is. Because it makes you understand the iambic pentameter better.
I was thinking about when we were talking about like religious framing and all of that, and I think that maybe the only thing I can come up with is that, well, I mean, I've lived in multiple college towns, but like, you know, most recently, I lived in Columbia, Missouri, and it is a college town. The University of Missouri, the like flagship, you know, university of the state of Missouri is there in Columbia. So you're just kind of like a Tigers fan. Like you just like, people wear Mizzou stuff. They wear Missouri Tigers stuff. And like, you just kind of assume that everyone is a Tigers fan. Like somebody who's a Jayhawks fan, like a Kansas fan, is just kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, you're weird. And so maybe culturally, it's a similar thing for people in that area of Ohio or West Virginia, where it's just kind of like culturally accepted that everybody is Christian, whether they believe in Jesus or not, whether, you know, and they may even go to church, whether they believe in Jesus or not, because that's just the culturally accepted thing to do. It doesn't matter where you live. There is potential for someone who is an evil person to live in your area. So if that potentially evil person is living in your area, then for them to fit in, they're going to need to assimilate. They're going to need to be a part of whatever that culturally accepted thing is, whether it's a Mizzou fan or a Christian, and so maybe that's the only thing I can think of, is that these bad people are either manipulating Christianity and trying to manipulate the situation to get what they want. That guy was going to be a molester no matter what. He just decided that it was easier to get young girls on his side if he was a preacher. And so maybe that was his way of doing the horrible things that he wanted to do. Jason Clarke's character, Carl, he has these urges to take these photographs. And so he needs to kind of like frame that in some sort of like, I'm getting close to God in this way. And so that's where he's doing that. That's the only thing that I can come up with. And I mean, we haven't talked about the title itself, but the devil all the time. I mean, I saw one thing that was like, well, you thought that you were talking to God, but it was the devil all the time. The most specific example of that is with the Harry Melling character, Roy, who kills his wife and is like, okay, now I'm going to resurrect her because that's what I heard from you. Well, I mean, maybe he was going crazy because he locked himself in a closet for 2 weeks. I mean, but
or got bit by a poisonous spider and his brain's never been the same.
That very well could have been. I mean, he had neurotoxins in him, but
he should have talked to Tom Holland.
Yeah.
How did this work out so well for you, Spider-Man?
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. He's like, I need some pointers here. It seems like it worked out really well for you, but for me, not so much. But so yeah, that's. I'm sure they didn't know much about neuroscience in Knock'em Stiff, Ohio at that time, but still, it's.
That's a great name.
Oh, it is a great name. It's real too. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
it's a great name.
So, I don't. That's the only thing I could come up with, and I'm just thinking about it right now. But that for this to not be kind of like an indictment of Christianity specifically,
I think that it's an interesting question about why are these people the way that they are, and why have they chosen Christianity to explore who they are. So did Robert Pattinson become a preacher because he knew he could manipulate young girls, or he became a preacher and realized his urges could be fulfilled easier because he was a preacher? Mm-hmm. At some point, it needs to be answered on some level, because that question to me right there is way more interesting than anything that we saw in the film.
It doesn't really matter. He's still abusing his power just in the same way Sebastian Stan's character, the sheriff, is abusing his power. It's all about abuse of power, and we see that all the time in movies. But
yeah, but no, not really. It does matter, because if he started out genuine and wanted to be a preacher and denied his perversions and thought becoming a preacher would help him keep them at bay, that's a much more interesting character than somebody who chose to become a preacher to manipulate his perversions. You see what I'm saying? Like, if he was trying to stop it from becoming an issue, if he prayed to the Lord and said, I cannot cheat on my wife, or I have these impure thoughts, and he got a message from God, or at least what he thought was God, could be the devil, that said, become a preacher and you will wash your soul clean of this. That's one way that you could go with that character. And it's, in my opinion, a much more interesting way, because a person is not automatically using God as a reason to act out. They have learned to use God to act out. All right, so we sort of have circled around to the beginning of the podcast at this point. So let me just tell you this. So I was thinking about it, and I made mention about Robert Pattinson being miscast, and I was trying to figure out how to understand this film better. And then it all of a sudden dawned on me, if you kind of switched people around, it might make a little bit more sense. For me, it at least did. So Robert Pattinson, Tom Holland's father, Bill Skarsgård, Jason Clarke's character with Riley Keough, and Jason Clarke as preacher.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that works.
Robert Pattinson didn't have enough heft to his age for me. He needed some he needed some length in his years. And at first I had Robert Pattinson as Jason Clarke's character, because that would have been really interesting to see Robert Pattinson playing a sociopath, psychotic guy. And I thought, well, is Riley Keough older than Jason or Robert Pattinson? Actually, she's 4 years younger. So they could play opposite each other without any age problem. But all of a sudden, just switching it around a little bit made it make sense to me more. It's almost like the guys are in the wrong positions, with the exception of Tom Holland and Sebastian Stan to a degree. And then there was a nice little thought where I thought, well, Sebastian Stan could probably play all those other characters that I just talked about, and he would have been infinitely interesting, because as the Robert Pattinson character, Sebastian Stan would have been, you know, the all-American boy looking face, and he would have been just charming and that guy next door look. There's something very menacing about Robert Pattinson's face, in a good way, not a bad way. It's not a criticism of his looks. It's just he already looks like he's a bad guy. So for him to play a uber bad guy just was a little on the nose for me. So I just thought it was interesting. I'm not saying that that's the way that they should have gone. Now, in the book, the Jason Clarke's character probably is much older. So that's probably why they went with him. Plus, he's a great actor. I've got no problem with him as an actor. It says something about a movie for me that when I'm watching it, I'm recasting it in my head. Like, that's not the point of storytelling.
Yeah, if it's a movie that is enveloping you, you're not thinking about that at all.
Not for a split second.
That says a lot right there. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and we'll see you next time.